Welcome to another episode of the Entrepreneur of Finland, Your Entrepreneur Journey podcast. Today we have Joonas Ahola. Was that correct? Was that close enough?
Close enough.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So Joonas Ahola, CEO and founder of MeetingPackage, based in Helsinki, and been, to be honest, traveling nearly all my life. A global citizen, so to say, if you want to say it like that, lived abroad and so forth. But currently is based in and living in Finland, Helsinki, running a business called MeetingPackage, which digitalizes and automates the meeting room booking and theoretically any space booking within a hotel. So all of these empty spaces and meeting rooms that used to be booked by phone call, email exchange, etc. Our technology allows the hotel to sell them as easy as they sell their bedrooms. So ultimately giving the possibility to reduce operational expenses and creating a better customer experience to the end users.
Very nice. How did that get started? Because it sounds quite common sense on the face of it. Because you book a hotel room, why can't you book a meeting room?
That's a good question. Yeah. So going back in history, I started my second company at the age of 16, which was an event agency, and then we ran and operated multiple properties ourselves for the past of 8 years, roughly. And on the last years on that business, I got really completely fed up with the RFPs and the hit rates of inquiries. So when you are a supplier and you start receiving inquiries like, hey, I want to book your space from 16th of May from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. and the client doesn't really actually know anything what they want. They don't know anything what the price could be, because at that point you couldn't book it. So the only thing you had was a web form or an inquiry form or a phone number or an email address. And technically you started banging or receiving emails from the clients and your email box got flooded. And we started to look in ways of, is there any technology out that could actually automate and digitize this? Because the only way to scale your business at that point was to hire more people to answer to these emails quickly. Because ultimately, if you don't answer in 24, 48 hours, the client is already in somewhere other location. Secondly, the other option was just hope for the best and send a standard RFP and don't even look what the customer has requested. Just reply quickly. And the third option was that you take the risk that you reply late, but then you lower your prices, which equally, again, drops your margins and your potential of growing your business. And none of those fit into my mindset at that point. And I started to look at then ways of actually, is there any technology out there? There wasn't. And then that's when MeetingPackage got started in 2014, roughly. And then 2014, when we started, our whole view and ideology was to build a marketplace. So because again, the marketplace economy has grown at that point, like there was the Booking.coms, the Airbnbs, etc. So our whole idea was to build a marketplace that connects the bookers and the suppliers on the other hand. And we did that for 3 years, launched the product officially in 2016 September. And being a marketplace, what we realized and recognized was this industry where we operate can never work in a marketplace way unless you have access to the live availability and the pricing. Because ultimately what we were just doing was bringing an additional extranet to the suppliers. So if I was a supplier back in the days, instead of my email box, I actually needed to sign into a marketplace email box. Nothing changed other than that. And we realized that the only way to actually serve the suppliers and eventually the end customers, the meeting bookers, is to be where the suppliers are and integrating and being available to fetch the data from their operational systems. Because everyone has their operational system, but of course the client has no access to it, whether it's an Oracle Opera system or whatever the hotels use. And therefore, we started looking ways of actually pulling that information from the operational system. And this was in 2018, roughly, pulling the availability from the operational system and creating an integration layer. So we changed our whole strategy of being a marketplace to actually becoming a software provider, which ultimately meant that we changed our commercial model, our technology stack, our team, culture, like a lot of things around it. But still, the big vision was the same. We want to make meeting room bookings as easy as booking hotels. And we just realized during this journey that this was a needed step in this industry. And that was why nobody has solved this industry. There's been coming marketplaces like mushrooms in the sky every week popping up in a new country, but they're all ultimately facing the same problem of low hit rate, long lead times, because no access to availability and price. So that's a little bit of a, sorry for the monologue, but that went kind of from a historical point of view. There's many years behind.
No. Very, very interesting, because when you say it, it's quite obvious that with these things that don't get booked constantly and all the time, if you're trying to host a website that has all of these places, you're going to find issues that actually these aren't booked as often as bedrooms. So you're not going to get the kind of traffic that you might expect. But talk me a little bit about how you made that transition from sort of offering a marketplace or website to software development.
That transition from that marketplace to go into SaaS was kind of, in some respect, it was quite easy because we had that technology, we had the backend already triggered for the purpose of handling all of these meeting room content, availability, pricing, but it was built so that the hotel would sign in and do that. So what we eventually needed to do is that all of that work that we did needed to be built and enhanced so that anyone can connect to, and we can connect to anyone. So that we needed some standardization, that we have a unified layer that then doesn't really matter what is the operational system or what is the customer facing system that we can actually talk to. And that's, of course, one of our biggest IPs today, that we're the only company in the world that has access to these sales and catering systems that the hotels use, which are part of the property management suite. Going a little bit technical, but technically that's the one what the hotel's receptionists use and all their back office use. So if you go to a hotel and check in as a normal customer, it's a property management system, a PMS in this industry called, which then they get the information, which room you're staying and all the housekeeping information, all of these kind of operational stuff is stayed there. And which is really, really weird. Like every investors and the people are asking like, hey, is this really so hard? Why is this something that hasn't been solved in the past? And bedrooms you've been able to book for 10 years, plus 10 years. And it's technically the same system, but it's an additional module to it. And the reality is that meeting rooms are not a one-stop shop. Which you need to remember is that bedrooms you book, you pay, you stay, you leave. And in that respect, it's one block. So the check-in time is always considered the same. Then the checkout time is considered the same. You might come in between, but that's kind of how the system blocks it. When it comes to meeting rooms, you don't have hundreds of meeting rooms in a property. You might have 5 or 6 or 7. And you need to be able to see that, okay, it's not anymore a block, it's an hour. It might be half an hour, 2.5 hours. And you need to take all of these considerations into set up times, set down times, what are the food and beverage items that you want, additional equipment, all of these things. And still you need to represent it to the customer in a simplified way.
Again, it all sounds very sort of common sense when you say it out loud. And aside from the sort of the big moment of realization, have there been any other sort of standout points from your journey so far, aside from noticing that sort of switch from marketplace to software?
Well, I think, of course, from being a 20 people organization in Finland and working with global organizations like Radisson, we've signed deals with Booking.com Business, CWT, which is second largest travel agency in the world, and we have a global agreement with it. I think it's a little bit like we're not thankful enough, or slash, how could I say it, celebrating it enough, because we're always going to the next win, the next win, the next win. But in theory, kind of getting those companies already signed up, those are big wins. And of course, we'll be progressing going to the forward or future, and they will bring a big value add, and they have already brought a big value add. But I think those are some of the wins, and of course, getting a lot of investors on board. Like what I want to highlight is getting global clients, getting global investors backing our journey and kind of seeing that we are on the right track, and all of them sharing the same vision on where the industry should be going.
Getting big clients like that, I guess, sort of when you're trying to focus on the next thing, always moving forwards, is excellent business. But sometimes it's good to take that moment to take in your accomplishments, right?
Yeah, it's always those things like it's 15 minutes of fame when you get it internally within the company, and then next thing, it's never enough.
So on your road to the bigger and better clients, what have you learned?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest areas, of course, is the team, which I'm really proud of. The team that is working with the product and the team that sells, whether it's customer service, marketing, product, and we all share the same vision. I think one of the biggest things, of course, is the fact that when we pivoted, we also realized that we need to a little bit pivot our own organizational structure, because again, what used to be a marketing play changed into a sales play, and what used to be a customer success play or a service play changed into a customer success play. And technology wise, again, instead of serving the front end, we started serving the back end as from an integration layer. So a lot of things changed, which ultimately, of course, meant that everyone needs to adapt to the new thing, whether it's by hiring new talent, or whether it's then just kind of restructuring the organization and the main focus areas and the objectives that we have as a team. And secondly, to keep an ultra clear focus on what we do is one of those kind of having the team, but at the same time keeping the focus, because it's easy when you pivot to still be kind of from a mindset of where we used to be and still serving them. And from a learning point, you should be able to do that decision much faster and kind of maybe already terminate anything that has been. We were quite long in the period that we were kind of marketplace, we were SaaS, we were a little bit of a combination of things, which ultimately meant that our focus was distributed or too widely, and then the focus wasn't there on where we should have it today. And that's ultimately, again, a learning curve from our side, that when you make a pivot or that kind of an exercise, that you either terminate what you had and then start focusing on that, or then you separate a team that only does that for a period of XYZ time, and then the other parts of it then focuses on that only, and not so that you have kind of in one person's plate, you have serving the marketplace and then creating something to the software as a service perspective, as say.
Now, how much you can give a percent if you like. How much would you say you dedicate to sort of marketing or sales or something along those lines?
Well, maybe a good point would be that we work to highlight now that we work in an industry that is highly impacted by pandemic, the current COVID virus, and prior to this, when we used to be a marketplace, I'm just dropping rough figures now. We were roughly 80% marketing, 90% marketing, and 10% sales, because we didn't really have anything to sell. We were pure commerce platform. When we made the pivot, it changed the other way around. So we dropped our marketing costs completely and went fully into sales. And what it's now been done is during the pandemic time, we changed from sales also a little bit to inbound sales and combination of marketing and inbound, in a sense that we launched a full self-service model of our platform during the pandemic time to allow us to support the individual independent venues around the world that are suffering due to the pandemic because they have layoffs, furloughs, their hotel is closed, whatsoever. The restrictions are happening in each country, whether it's social distancing, hygiene, things, or whatever. So we allowed these independent individual venues to self-register to our platform, create everything themselves with a automated fashion that helped them on the implementation side. And this technically removed the kind of sales, what used to be sales, hardcore sales, in the sense that we pick up the phone or email to the client. This was done automatically, and we spent €0 in marketing at that point. And what we've done now is we received more than 2,800 individual hotels during the course of last 9 months. We launched it in May, June, so roughly 9 months. Nearly 3,000 hotels have registered with €0 marketing cost. And that's kind of, again, A, tells the story that this solution is actually needed. B, the hotels are suffering, and C, that, okay, we need to even more focus on the automation part, giving the possibility for these to opt in the same way as you opt into any SaaS solution, whether they connect Netflix account or Spotify. You don't call them, you just go in and register and start using it. This is the kind of mentality that we want as a company to serve those individual venues, independent venues, that they can take everything into use as easy as you sign up into a Netflix account. And then on the hotel chain wise, of course, that needs outbound sales and that needs enterprise sales, mainly due to the fact that they have so much complexity in the integration landscape, which cannot be then automated to that extent. So going back to the question, I think 20% now currently really outbound sales to the chains, 10% marketing, and rest is more automation and kind of inbound.
So more of a sort of trying to shift to sort of a passive sales kind of technique, you might say.
You would say it like that, yeah.
And we've covered a little bit of challenges or difficulties, you might say, with business and getting around. Obviously, a pandemic's a pretty big challenge to tackle with. But some of the slightly more subtle ones are sort of the managing sort of the personal life, or trying to push forwards a company, or managing a team, or managing just time in general. So how have you dealt with those sorts of challenges rather than the big pandemic?
To be honest, it's been a little bit of a challenge for myself, being a person who's always on the move. Before the pandemic, used to travel like 50 to 70 flights or 100 plus travel days a year, and now being 365 days at home, there's a big change there. And then the change is also mental in a very personal ways, meaning that what used to be was a hectic lifestyle, in the sense that you go to an airport lounge, you need to do 5 hours of work in actually 1.5 hours. You just made it happen. Now you have that 5 hours, so you're like, okay, maybe I can postpone this and start doing that. And kind of there has been a big change how I've been needed to develop myself to this new situation, to allow kind of the whole prioritization and the sense of urgency, and keeping my mind fresh as it used to be fresh due to the kind of exotic and like hectic lifestyle that I used to have. And it was a little bit forced by nature and kind of the outside, that I need to do now these things. I need to get it done before my flight leaves. And now when it's not like that, you need something else to trigger that, how could I say it, trigger that action,
energy,
rather than energy / kind of the actionable concrete thing, due to the fact that it's not done by something coming from the outside, and it needs to come from your inside, which also has kind of ultimately giving me the possibility to look what is on my plate, what should I be doing, and kind of learning the kind of prioritization as such that supports the company and the goals. But it's also I've been able to much more delegate and kind of be working closely with the team, since I have now much more time. What used to be, again, that in the airport, I'd rather now do it myself. I can actually now give that to some of the employees and give them the possibility of doing it from end to end, rather than myself doing it to a certain extent, because it was a question always about time zones or sense of urgency in regards to time that I'm next 8 hours in a flight. And that's something that has the positive, but also it's been really a learning curve for myself, and it didn't happen overnight. I like first 2-3 months, I was like, what do I do with all of these hours?
From one extreme to the other, from doing 5 hours work in an hour and a half to, oh, now what do I do? I've done all my 5 hours work in an hour and a half. I'll go make some food, I guess.
Exactly.
Would you, if you could, where would the balance be between one extreme and the other?
Yeah, well, of course, in somewhere in between. I like to travel. I like to have a hectic lifestyle and kind of on that side. But of course, 100 travel days a year is a little bit maybe too much.
Yeah.
In growing a business, but at the same time, it could be a balance somewhere. And it's always not the travel is to meet people, even the team members outside, because we have people in UK, in Sweden, etc. And now we haven't had the personal time to meet due to the travel bans and the possibility of travel without quarantine. So it's been a little bit of a, well, virtual as we are here, and it doesn't give that same kind of interaction. We just had a meeting a few weeks back with our team, and we were like, hey, this meeting could have been done in 15 minutes if we were on site and drawing into a whiteboard. And it now took 1 hour and so forth.
So if you could pass on some tips or advice to somebody looking to get into this field, or if you've got some wider suggestions.
Choose another field during this time. Just kidding. But like every pandemic, and there's some wise people said it much earlier, is that from every pandemic there comes something good. And like if you look at historical pandemics and kind of crises, there's always become a new unicorn or a new growth company that has actually scaled because of the solving the problems that the new economy has. And in this sense, I believe now it's a really good time, whether it's the hospitality industry or travel industry, or any other industry. It's a really great time to kind of look at the problems, because the problems are really visible during these pandemic times.
Reminds me of a saying which I have no idea how international it is or not, but it's that limitation is the mother of all creativity. Something along those lines, anyway.
It sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds snappy. But it's kind of that idea that you might be limited by a pandemic as a company that does meeting room sort of joining up between clients and customers and all that kind of stuff. But there is always something if you can try and find it, if you've got the freedom to get there.
Exactly, yeah. Now,
for a little bit more of a, you might say, an intimate question, as it were.
Yikes.
No, it's as intimate as you want it to be. It's more sort of getting back to sort of your upbringing, your childhood, and that kind of stuff. It's sort of, did you have an entrepreneurial uncle that helped you start a business? Or
yeah, of course, and that's kind of where everything started. I joined the Junior Achievement Young Enterprise Company of the Year program in high school at the age of 14. And that's kind of where my entrepreneurial career, it's a global organization working worldwide, Junior Achievement called. And in Finland, there's a company called, or company program called Company of the Year, which you establish for a year with your colleagues and then run that company. And that was my first company, but I founded at the age of 14. And then that was when we imported and signed a deal with Schneider in Germany to bring back set-top boxes to Finland. And we ran that for 1 year, and that was when the year when analogical TV responders ended in Finland, that you needed to either buy a new TV or then buy a set-top box. And we started selling, of course, to family and friends and neighbors and whatsoever. And that's what influenced me. I got hooked with the mentality of learning by doing, and the possibility that there is no ceiling, so to say, that, hey, you can imagine, you can do, you can create, you can innovate, and whatever you want to do, the information is available for you to learn. And ultimately, that's also kind of what I always say to entrepreneurs and other people, is that if you are not the best person or the best knowledgeable from your industry, then you need to start learning it. You don't need to be widely, but if you decide on an industry, you need to start learning and educating it from your free time, that you know how the industry works back upside down. that you're not coming into a sales situation or in a situation that someone else tells you acronym or whatever and you don't know what it means. Like, these things are just something that you need to be, when you have the passion, you have the motivation towards it. Entrepreneurs do it without them even acknowledging they are doing it, reading news from the industry, looking at stuff and so forth. And that's all educational. But it all started from my JA, junior achievement career, which ultimately led me to finding the right people at the right time, meeting people who are like-minded and maybe done already some successful growth stories in behind. And kind of those are the people who pushed me and started my next company at the age of 16. And that's when I got hooked.
How did you even get onto something like that? At 14, I think is quite young. Quite young to be like, I'm going to start a business.
Well, I've never been good at school, or let's say I've been good at school, but not motivated enough about school in general, kind of all of these lessons that you need to do just because you need to do them rather than where your focus is or what you want to do. And there was this company or this program in school at that point called the Company of the Year program, ran by Junior Achievement, which is this is something that is worldwide in different schools, whether it's high school or university and so forth. There's different programs for different age groups. And well, it said, and I knew the people who were running it, and they kind of, hey, this is where you can do your own stuff. This is where you can like show all the things that you want to do and innovate and kind of learning by doing. Exactly. And that's something that, of course, triggered me that, hey, rather than reading books, I want to start getting my hands dirty and start doing it.
Did you skip university? Were you just like, I like to learn by actually doing the thing rather than learning the thing by
well, I'm a university dropout, if you want to put it in some category. I went to university, but 2 years and the business took over.
So this might be a bit of a cheesy question. But is there any like words or mottos you have? Any like your go-to motivational phrase, perhaps, or something like that?
Well, to be honest, I hate this question always because it's so, how could I say it? Like, everyone uses the same words and so on, and cliche would be maybe the right thing. But learn by doing is one of my favorite ones, which is from the past, and there's so much variations to that, meaning that you focus on the right things, you get best on what you're motivated about and where you have passion about, and kind of rather than thinking about it, putting your hands dirty and so forth.
Fair enough. Got to ask the question, because every now and then you get some very elaborate and interesting answers. But yeah, I understand. Let's get asked.
There's always someone who has already coded it before, so you cannot really take the phrase or the owner of that, so to say.
There's always somebody who's said it slightly better.
even true, yeah.
So you said that obviously more or less a self-starter in terms of at the age of 14, just didn't have the role models. But have you had any since 14 to now? who's sort of business inspirations?
I wouldn't name one person or two people, but I would say in general, kind of all the publicly available and the success stories that you read in the news, whether it's Finnish companies, global companies, or industry companies that have done it, have created something successful, whether it's economically successful, revenue-wise, exit-wise, whatever, which gives you that trigger. And I think all of these are something that kind of play as a role model / get the inspiration from, because ultimately that's where we want to be, and ultimately that's where we see ourselves going. And all of these news just give you or kind of stories, news, live stories, or what are they called, editorials and so forth. These are things that kind of give you the mentality that if they can do it, why can't I?
Should probably start wrapping up a little bit now, but is there any advice, tips that you would want to pass on to how to become an entrepreneur, how to stay being an entrepreneur, how to start selling things at the age of 14.
Well, again, going back to the timing, I think now is one of the best times to start it. If you ever thought about it, kind of best times in regards to starting something new and really solving a problem within any industry or the economy itself. And maybe some tips, of course, is if you decide to go the startup route and kind of growth company route, one of the major things that, of course, I had no experience from the past being a more standard or traditional entrepreneur rather than a growth company startup entrepreneur, is that when it comes to funding and receiving funding, it always takes more time than you estimate. So you should start it much earlier than you actually need it. And those are just normal tips that you hear, of course, that some people say that you're always fundraising. Some people say that you should start fundraising, and when you fundraise, you should have at least 18 months of runway or so. But at the same time, when you start doing it at the first times or the second times, start always looking at much earlier than when it's the final deadline, so to say, because it just takes more time. And ultimately, whatever you do, keep your focus and learn also to pivot if needed. That don't try to go through the wall if it just doesn't make sense. You can still solve the problem that you're originally dealing with, or you want to solve it by pivoting or changing your business model, commercial structure, whatever it is. And then, of course, asking for help and guidance. There's so much people out there who are willing to help. And personally, I love also to give feedback / help new entrepreneurs, and I've been mentoring some of the junior G-Ment alumni, which are even younger than I am, and maybe something that I can give to them then also back.
All that's left is to say thank you for sharing your story. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best of luck in the future. And with
likewise,
continuing what seems to be somewhat of a niche.
Yeah, let's hope for the pandemic to end soon enough.
Yes, for sure.